Wanted to ask both of you one final question. What are your thoughts on ethics in AI, and how do we police the ethical use of AI? Julian, you want to share your thoughts?
Sure, it's something I've taken a very strong interest in. Ethics is something that every software engineer is aware of, but actually enters their lives quite seldom traditionally. When we think about data, where you store data, whether you encrypt data, whether it is, in the case of HIPAA considerations, is it personally identifying? That's kind of the domain where the ethics lived for a lot of people back in the day. Now with MLAI, there's a lot of emergent behavior coming. So there are solutions which are trying to stitch an end-to-end dynamic process together that goes beyond, say, the reporting and starts to feed directly into, whether it's a recommendation engine or whatever, something with a real-world consequence. And so the same level of human transparency isn't necessarily there. If you were a business analyst being asked to run very specific queries, you might look at them and think, well, okay, that could be abused. But even then, there isn't the assumption that anyone's going to act in an unethical way upon them. It's a very emergent behavior in the world of MLAI. And in a lot of celebrated cases, we've seen where very large organizations have identified an ethical problem and have pulled the plug on a project. And as this starts to become more available to smaller businesses, I'm sure that's going to be problematic. It's not everyone's going to have a very easy time pulling the plug on projects which are taking up a good amount of their budgetary input. And I'm sure it's something people will struggle with. I guess the only advice I can imagine would be thinking as hard as you can preemptively of what the consequence is of what you're asking AI to do. Is there the capacity for this to affect people's lives in an adverse or prejudicial way? In some cases, there won't be, but having that foresight is going to be quite tricky. Of course, there's the example that's emerged in recent years of, promoting which post should I see can suddenly have political outcomes, which was just fascinating.
Thank you, Julian. Ranjan, the same question, just to repeat it. What are your thoughts on ethics in AI, and how do we police the ethical use of AI?
Oh boy, where do we start? This is actually such a fascinating but deep field. I feel we should do a separate conversation just on this topic. But just to add to what Julian said, it is becoming an emergent behavior out of these ML models. And in certain cases, the developers, even the businesses, are not aware of it. And in certain cases, it is not even people who are being impacted. The businesses are also getting impacted because of bias in the models that are being developed. I read a report some time back about all these. During the last year, all the researchers started applying ML techniques to COVID data. And some fascinating outcome of that data was the models were reacting to the fonts of the plates they are scanning, or even whether the patient is lying down or standing up, and predicting seriousness of COVID infections based on these kind of unrelated items. And these things are very hard for both the builders and the end users to identify. So I feel that a lot of work has to go into this field before we can settle on a clear definition of what are the do's and don'ts and what should people guard against or the best practices.
Gentlemen, thank you both for your insights today. This has been very helpful, and I'm sure others will enjoy listening to these Q&A responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Julian.